You're watching F1 Spark, and right now we're witnessing the beginning of the end of one of F1's most promising partnerships. McLaren won their second constructors' title 3 days ago. The champagne's barely dried, but Oscar Piastri, the championship leader, remember, might already be planning his exit to Ferrari. And it all started with 7 words he said over team radio in Singapore that changed everything. Stay until the end, because the real story isn't what happened on track, it's what happens next. Right, so McLaren just wrapped up their second consecutive Constructors' Championship in Singapore, and you'd think that would be the headline, wouldn't you? But no, instead, everyone's talking about what went down between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris on lap 1. And honestly, this might be the moment that changes everything for McLaren moving forward. Let's set the scene. Singapore Grand Prix, lap 1, turn 3, Norris started 5th, Piastri 3rd. Now Norris got a brilliant start, genuinely one of his best all season, and he's making moves everywhere. He's got Kimi Antonelli ahead of him, who didn't quite nail his launch, probably down to tyre temperatures not being optimal on that Mercedes. By turn 1, Norris is fully alongside Antonelli, and he's already eyeing up his teammate. Here's where it gets messy. Through turns 1 and 2, Piastri doesn't get the ideal line, and suddenly both McLarens are side by side going into turn 3. Norris has got the inside line, which is massive at this track, and then contact. Wheels bang together, and Piastri's the one who comes off worse, dropping from 3rd to 4th while Norris slots into 3rd. Now telemetry data shows exactly what happened. Norris came into turn 3 at a much higher speed than Max Verstappen ahead of him. Verstappen had braked earlier, forcing Lando to change direction at the last moment. He clips the back of Max's Red Bull, gets unsettled, and that sends him bouncing into Piastri. The stewards called it a racing incident, immediately no investigation necessary, they said. But here's the thing. The stewards weren't the ones Piastri was worried about. He wanted his own team to do something about it. And McLaren? They said no. The radio messages tell you everything you need to know about Piastri's frustration. Straight away, he's on the radio. That wasn't very team-like, but sure. Then on lap 2. So are we cool with Lando just barging me out of the way? His race engineer Tom Stellard tells him they're looking at it, asking him to settle in and control the controllables. By lap 3, they come back with their verdict: no further action. They can see Lando had to avoid Verstappen. They'll review it afterwards. Piastri's response? Mate, that's not fair. I'm sorry, that's not fair. And then the absolute kicker? Yeah, but if he has to avoid another car by crashing into his teammate, that's a pretty shit job of avoiding. That last line got everyone's attention because this is Oscar Piastri we're talking about. The guy who's been calm, collected, diplomatic through everything. He's the one they call the next Alain Prost for his composure. But in Singapore, he lost his cool completely, and rightfully so from his perspective. Now, McLaren's position is interesting. Team boss Andrea Stella says the contact was a consequence of another racing situation. Basically, it's Max's fault for being in the way. He's promising they'll review it in forensic detail, have good conversations like they did after Canada when Norris crashed into the back of Piastri and took himself out. All very diplomatic, very measured, but Piastri wasn't buying it in the moment. When you look at the context, you can see why. Remember Monza? Just a few races ago, Norris agreed to let Piastri pit first to cover off Leclerc. Then Norris had a slow stop 3 to 3.5 seconds extra from a wheel gun issue on the left rear. McLaren immediately told Piastri to give the position back. They intervened within the race to fix what they saw as an injustice caused by their own mistake. Fast forward to Singapore. Norris makes contact with Piastri, doesn't matter if it's because of Verstappen, the end result is the same. Positions swapped through contact. But this time, no intervention. And that's what's got Piastri fuming. The rules seem to change depending on the situation, and from his seat, it looks suspiciously like they're not being applied fairly. The numbers matter here too. That contact changed the entire race. Norris finished 3rd, Piastri 4th, just 2 seconds behind. The gap in the championship cut from 25 points to 22 points, with 6 races and 3 sprints remaining. If Norris hadn't made those places on lap 1, he admitted himself he probably never would have. Singapore is impossible to overtake on. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Piastri's slow stop. On lap 28, 1 lap after Norris pitted, Piastri comes in and loses 3 to 3.5 seconds on his stop. Sound familiar? Same issue as Monza, but reversed. This time though, it actually helped McLaren avoid an even bigger headache because Piastri was flying in the second half of the race. He was averaging 0.25 seconds per lap quicker than Norris and 0.35 faster than Verstappen. If that stop had been clean, he'd have been right on Norris's gearbox, fighting for that podium spot, possibly even challenging Verstappen for second given Max was having brake balance and downshift issues. But what really caught everyone's attention was what happened after the race. There's this video that went viral showing Piastri unplugging his steering wheel while Zak Brown is mid-sentence trying to congratulate him. Oscar, back-to-back champions, tough race, thank you for... And then silence. McLaren later clarified that Piastri had already switched the car off before Brown started talking, but the optics? Absolutely brutal. Then there's the whole podium celebration thing. Queen's "We Are the Champions" is playing. The team's up there with Norris celebrating the constructors' title. And where's the championship leader? He's in the media pen doing mandatory interviews because that's what happens when you finish fourth. The procedure is rigid: top three go to the podium, everyone else goes straight to the scales, then the media pen. So Piastri physically couldn't be there even if he wanted to. But again, the optics of the championship leader missing the team's biggest celebration in decades. Not great. When Piastri did speak to media, he was diplomatic, but you could see the controlled frustration. He kept saying he needed to see the full incident before making conclusions, but when pressed on whether McLaren's been fair all season, there was this pause. I think ultimately yes, he said. Things have been better at certain points. Yes. That pause told you everything. He gave emphatic no responses when asked if he feels McLaren's giving Norris preferential treatment and whether this would change how he races Norris. But there's this underlying current of tension that you just can't ignore anymore. And this is where the wider implications come in. Multiple reports have linked Piastri to Ferrari for 2027. His manager Mark Webber, the former Red Bull driver, basically confirmed Ferrari's interest, saying even if Ferrari remains a point of arrival, he must achieve the final result, with McLaren first. Ferrari's looking at life after Lewis Hamilton, whose contract expires at the end of 2026, and they want either Max Verstappen or Oscar Piastri. That's the level Piastri's operating at now. Red Bull was sniffing around too. Helmut Marko made some comments suggesting Webber was pushing for talks, though Piastri shut that down pretty quickly, saying there's no truth to it, and he's very happy at McLaren. But the point is, top teams are circling because they can see what everyone else sees. This kid is the real deal. Now let's talk about the Zak Brown element, because this is where things get properly spicy. Former F1 driver Juan Pablo Montoya straight up accused Brown of showing favoritism towards Norris. He pointed out that you keep hearing Zak say, "This is Lando's era, but never this is Oscar's era," and that's not wrong. Brown has been very vocal about Norris being ready to be world champion, about this being his time. Then there's the technical side. McLaren's technical chief Neil Holdy revealed in July that updates to the MCL39 were tailored according to Norris's feedback because he provides more detailed debriefs than Piastri. That's a pretty significant admission when you're trying to maintain equal treatment between championship contenders. Brown himself said at the start of 2025 that both drivers start with equal opportunities and they'll see how the season plays out, potentially getting to a situation where one supports the other. But with the constructors wrapped up now, what does that mean for the Drivers' Championship? Brown says the policy remains free to race, but after Singapore, Piastri might be questioning what that actually means in practice. Norris, for his part, has been completely defiant about the whole thing. He argues anyone on the grid would have done exactly what he did, going for that gap on the inside. If you fault me for just going up the inside and putting my car on the inside of a big gap, then I don't think you should be in Formula One, he said. He maintains it wasn't aggressive towards Piastri, it was just racing with Max that went wrong. And the FIA and the team agreed with him, so in his mind, case closed. But that's the problem with McLaren's famous Papaya rules, these principles of fairness, equality, and clean racing between teammates. You can't plan for every scenario, as Piastri himself admitted after Monza, and when you do intervene in some situations but not others, it creates this sense of inconsistency that breeds resentment. Andrea Stella keeps talking about trust being the key thing McLaren needs to maintain. He says they need to be accurate because there's a lot at stake, and he's right. But how do you maintain trust when your championship leader feels hard done by for the third time in 3 races? After the slow stop team order in Monza, whatever happened in Baku that saw his lead cut, and now this Singapore incident. There's this comparison people keep making to Senna and Prost at McLaren back in 1989. The San Marino Grand Prix, supposed pre-race agreement about driving etiquette on the opening lap, and it all fell apart from there. The parallels are uncomfortable for McLaren because that rivalry basically destroyed the team's internal harmony. Stella insists they'll come back even more united and stronger like they did after Canada, but Canada was different. That was Norris making an obvious error, crashing into his teammate and taking himself out. Nobody questioned what happened there. Singapore is murky. Was it a racing incident? Or should McLaren have intervened? And that ambiguity is what makes it dangerous. The statistics show how tight this battle is. Piastri leads by 22 points with 6 races and 3 sprints remaining. Norris needs to outscore him by an average of 3.7 points per event to win the title. It's completely doable, especially given Norris has momentum from cutting the gap 3 races in a row now. But here's what I think happens next. Piastri could justifiably take a harder line with Norris in future battles. He moved aside at Monza because of McLaren's mistake, but they didn't correct Norris's mistake in Singapore. So what obligation does he have to play nice anymore? The Constructors is done. Every man for himself now in pursuit of that driver's crown. And if teams like Ferrari and Red Bull are watching this unfold, and you know they are, they're seeing a supremely talented driver who might be getting frustrated with his current situation. Piastri's contracted until the end of 2026, potentially 2028, but contracts can be negotiated. If the preferential treatment perception continues, if more racing incidents happen that seem to benefit one driver over another, that could become a factor. The other thing to watch is whether McLaren's approach changes now the Constructors is secured. Do they start backing one horse? Brown's been careful to say they won't, but when you're this close to a driver's title, can you really afford to let them race freely if one incident could cost you everything? What makes this whole situation fascinating is that both drivers are absolutely on it right now. Piastri with 7 wins this season, Norris with his improved racecraft and pace. They're proving to be the class of the field when they've got the car underneath them. But that internal battle could be McLaren's undoing. Singapore should have been pure celebration, back-to-back Constructors' titles, matching Red Bull's 2023 record of wrapping it up with 6 races to spare. Instead, the story is about wheel banging, radio fury, and questions about fairness that McLaren can't seem to definitively answer. Piastri's usually ice-cold demeanour cracking in Singapore tells you everything about the pressure building inside that team. We're seeing chinks in the armour of a guy known for his composure, and when the pressure ramps up over these final 6 rounds, when every point matters, that's when things could really explode. So what's next for Oscar Piastri? Well, short-term, he needs to keep his head, keep driving like he has been because he was rapid in Singapore, genuinely quicker than both Norris and Verstappen in the second half. Long-term, he needs to decide if McLaren's commitment to fairness is genuine or just good PR. And what's next for McLaren? They've got 6 races to navigate this minefield without losing either the Drivers' Championship or the trust of one of the hottest properties in F1. They're promising forensic reviews and good conversations, but talk is cheap when you're fighting for a title you haven't won since 2008. The Singapore Grand Prix might have clinched the Constructors' Championship, but it's opened up a whole new set of questions that McLaren desperately needs to answer. And with Ferrari waiting in the wings, potentially interested in prizing Piastri away for 2027, those answers better be convincing. Right, what do you reckon? Is Piastri right to be frustrated? Should McLaren have swapped them back? And does Zak Brown show favoritism towards Norris, or is that just how it looks from the outside? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this championship battle is only going to get more intense from here.